Good evening everyone, I hope everyone's doing well. Wearing my coat but in a different manner because obviously I don't want to cook myself alive in this sun. But that's not why you called. No, let's talk Tommy Robinson and let's also talk about the Russia-Ukraine stuff. So the first priority is obviously going to be Tommy Robinson's safety because it has always been in jeopardy for some time. The international limit on how long somebody can spend in solitary confinement at any given time is 15 days. However, as we all know, it's getting nearer 150 days that Tommy Robinson has spent in solitary confinement, to the point, well, it's actually more around 130, maybe give or take a few days. But it doesn't change the fact that right now we have had doctors basically have to go and see Tommy Robinson to see what kind of condition he's in. And as we know from when he was in HMP only, when he was practically half starved, when he came out, he looked like he looked like what I looked like in year 5 or something like that. No, not year 5, in Rainbow Nursery School when I was 5 years old. He was practically a stick man. Yes, hard to imagine me being a stick, but hey-ho, I digress. He was heavily malnourished, and he still is being effectively malnourished to this point as well as being obviously mentally tortured, psychologically tortured, and all the while Keir the traitor Starmer, who could end this, and he should, considering he knows all about human rights laws, chooses to keep him in solitary confinement. And there was even thoughts that he was going to think about moving him to Belmarsh again. And before anybody wonders, I believe it was Andre Walker that mentioned this. Now, I'm going to very briefly dip off on a tangent for about a half minute, because there's something else that we should be worried about as well. It's the new law that's coming in, as far as sentencing is concerned. It turns out that now, old Whitey is going to be much more likely to receive a custodial sentence over those who are basically part of ethnic minority and faith minority groups, which means groups like Islam and transgenders and what have you, they're likely going to get away with more crimes with a slap on the wrist, while old Whitey could still be sentenced to jail, like they have been, for simply posting something on the internet. How does this relate to Tommy Robinson? Well, it doesn't relate directly to Tommy Robinson as far as his crime's concerned, because obviously he was found guilty of contempt of court, although effectively, let's face it, this info was already in the public domain, so you could argue he shouldn't have even been guilty on that at all. I mean, last time I checked, it was the Americans who released the Silence documentary, which was what they were bitching and complaining about. All Tommy did was post something that was effectively already in the public domain. But of course the mainstream media won't tell you this. You know the drill, folks, because say it with me, it doesn't suit the narrative. And it seems to me that Keir the traitor Starmer is doing everything he can to piss us off. And I know some people will say, well, Keir the traitor Starmer wants us to go to civil war. We're unarmed. Technically, no, we're not, because legally we can have knives in our home. Now, let me be clear, this is not me saying that we should go out on the streets armed with knives like a certain demographic of people, 2 of them in fact. But what I am saying is we're not completely defenseless. So any notion of we can't defend ourselves is a bit misguided, quite frankly. But it seems Keir the traitor Starmer wants civil war, and people will use the argument, oh, he'll use this to put draconian laws in. I don't think he realises how much this will backfire. Not only will he prove what we've been saying all this time is right, not only will he prove that he is a treacherous sectarianist bastard, this Keir the traitor Starmer, he's also going to prove a point in that we are living in a dictatorship. Or maybe I was right first time. He is a man who has no morals and no integrity, a man with no principles, and a man who has more lies than a Pinocchio factory. And who does he target? The white working class. Meanwhile, we see Muslims, we see Islam, we see illegal immigrants get a free pass and free housing in our hotels at our expense. As a human rights lawyer, he shouldn't be giving human rights to illegals that come over here because they have no legal right of entry. Meanwhile, Tommy Robinson, he should be getting, well, let me put it this way. Tommy Robinson right now is lucky if he receives 14 to 16 hours per week out of solitary confinement. To put into perspective, Category D prisoners are supposed to get 140 to 160 hours outside their prison a week. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. This is blatant human rights abuse, which Keir the traitor Starmer is engaging in, knowing full well that this is against Article 3 of the Human Rights Act. It is torture. And as I've always been doing, my petition to see Tommy Robinson released and Nicola Marfleet basically sacked will be in the description below. Because no matter what you think of Tommy Robinson, no matter whether you think he's a thug, whether you think he's the best thing since sliced bread, it doesn't change the fact that his human rights are being violated. He is being treated effectively like a terrorist for calling out other terrorists, for calling out the rape gangs, for calling out the jihadis, for calling out all the nonsense. He's being treated like a terrorist for speaking out about them. And as I said before, I have not been advocating for a violent revolution or civil war to take place. I am the last person who wants to see that shit become fruition. Or come to fruition, rather. But the cold, bitter truth is, if anything happens to Tommy Robinson, if he's killed in prison, there will be all hell breaking loose on the streets of the United Kingdom. And our army knows where their loyalty lies. Well, most of them anyway. I suspect Keir the traitor Starmer will get a fifth of the army, if he's lucky. But I suspect more than anything, the vast majority of that army, they will serve the people. They will serve us, not him. He does not know how much a civil war will backfire on him. It'll all blow up in his face, just like that. Because people know full well in the army that we fight for what's right, while Islam fights to turn this country into a third world shithole. Islam fights to basically bring a caliphate worldwide, and this is just another island on their conquest. And think about it, it would give them such a huge advantage, because now they've got a whole island to themselves. The only way in is by air or sea, whereas some other countries, you can literally walk over the borders. And the reason they've been able to flourish is because we have traitorous MPs and prime ministers who are more interested in protecting that one sect of people versus doing their job and protecting all of us. But back on point, whether or not you like Tommy Robinson, last time I checked, he wasn't a terrorist. Last time I checked, he hasn't committed a criminal offence to be in prison. And by that I mean, obviously, right now. Obviously, we know he's got a criminal record. That's no secret. But one thing a lot of these left-wing NPCs seem to conveniently leave out in almost every case arguing the criminal record issue with Tommy Robinson is context. You know why? Because if they had the context, their arguments would be dismantled. Just like that. Why else do you think the left-wing NPCs and the mainstream media are so reluctant to give us the context? If ordinary people who go about their daily lives knew about this, they would be incensed. They would be up in arms against this shit. They would be quite rightly, calling out our establishment. And frankly, they'd be taking out the trash. The way I slice this is Keir the traitor Starmer is in a practically impossible spot. If he goes ahead with his little plan to kill Tommy Robinson, he's going to have a full-scale civil war on his hands, and he's going to have a military that will basically align with us, and there'll be a coup. If he doesn't, Tommy's going to come out of prison even stronger than ever, even more pissed off than ever, and he is going to be wanting the establishment's blood, basically. He will take them to task over this. Think about it. If Tommy Robinson comes out of jail, he will be able to destroy the establishment with what they've done to him. If the truth ever comes out about the torture of Tommy Robinson, this establishment is done for. Simple as that. Because they know full well that if it was anyone else, they would be violated by ordinary people regarding human rights. Human rights lawyers would jump all over this like white on rice. They are doing this to Tommy because they think that their little spin doctoring and their weave a good yarn mentality is going to save them from being potentially destroyed by ordinary good people. They are wrong. When the truth comes out, that establishment is fucking history. There is no shot that people will ever forgive what they've done to Stephen Yaxley Lennon. It's a matter of keep pushing the truth out. Remember, 2 hours a day he's allowed out. He keeps getting cold sweats. He keeps waking up in the middle, or at the crack of dawn basically, 3 a.m, worrying about his kids. He is currently suffering from CPTSD. And I am suffering from PTSED, post-traumatic stress eating disorder. Anyway, he is suffering from PTSD. He is suffering while he is spending every single day that he has been in prison in solitary confinement. This is torture. Reducing his rations as well also comes under torture, as it effectively means he may be getting malnourished. What they are doing to him is they are doing everything they can. This goes beyond just being a little malicious. This is pure, unbridled intent to break a man who goes against the system. That's what it is. Make no bones about it. Keir the traitor Starmer already has blood on his hands. If he has Tommy's blood on his hands, my God, all hell will break loose. Of course, he thinks that he's going to get what he wants if we go to a civil war scenario. And as I said, and let me be clear, I do not want this. I don't condone it, I will not want it or justify it. But I will completely understand if people feel like that's the only option they've got left, quite frankly. But the way I slice it, he won't be able to imprison all of us. He won't be able to stop all of us. And if the army gets involved, well, he's got two hopes of making it out of this. No Hope and Bob Hope. He ought to be real careful what he wishes for, because he is pissing off people on every side of the spectrum. His own voters, his own party, the opposition parties, the ordinary British people. He is upsetting everyone with his antics, his warmongering, his treachery, his deceit, his blatant two-tier policing, as a police car goes by no less, his blatant two-tier justice, and his sectarianism. He has no idea how badly the death of Tommy Robinson would cause his plans to backfire. Like, the people would take over, indubitably. Hundreds of thousands of people walking the streets. And the army, well, at best, they're going to have about, what? Well, we've only got enough kit for about 10,000 anyway, so he'll get 2,000 soldiers that are armed, if he's lucky. So he's probably not even going to get a fifth of the army, quite frankly. Way I slice it, it would put Keir the traitor Starmer in a position that is completely inescapable. The people would want his blood, and they'd have his head on a spike, because that's the way they see Keir the traitor Starmer. They see him as a traitor, and you know the history with traitors. We don't take kindly to them. So, you have the right to continue what you're doing to Tommy Robertson establishment, Keir the traitor Starmer. Just be warned, though, that actions have consequences, and indubitably, you'll have to pay the full price of that shit. Now, regarding Russia and Ukraine, first and foremost, I think it's rather odd that that video has only gotten like a couple of hundred views in the 15 or so hours that it's been out from when I'm recording this, as it is very relevant to what's going on in the world. I can understand my life update, because obviously most people don't want to hear about my life. But the thing is, I think YouTube is going on their censorship offensive again. I think they're starting to realise the truth's getting out, and they're going to do all they can to suppress it. But now back to the actual news. So, the US has already withdrawn military support for Ukraine. So, they're not going to get any more troops, they're not going to get any more weapons, they're not going to get any more money. And I made that video yesterday, basically saying Zelensky folded like a cheap suit. And I still stand by that. Less than 48 hours after that military support was withdrawn, Zelensky now wants peace. Coincidence? I think not. I think he understands more than anything that he won't win this war on his own, quite frankly. And what he's been doing in the past is he's basically been poking now the American bear with a stick, I guess, as well as us. He's basically been demanding money, demanding support, which, last time I checked, I think the US and the UK, both individually and together, are more powerful than Ukraine. So he doesn't have any right to make demands of anyone. He's just a jumped up little gym bunny who thinks he makes the orders around here. No, he takes them. He needs to be reminded. We could withdraw at any time and be like, you know what, good luck guys. Let's see how you do against Russia on your own. Oh, he'd very quickly change his tune after that, let me tell you. And as I've always said, I don't wish bad upon the Ukrainian people. I certainly wouldn't wish it on the people who do not know a battle and would not seek it, quite frankly. Anything that happens, though, to the Ukrainian people, it's on Zelensky's head. Yes, Putin should not have invaded, but Zelensky could have decided at any time, okay, we'll give you the resources you want, because it turns out it was a load of lithium that Putin wanted. And if Trump was still in power, he, I suspect, and this is just speculation, because obviously he didn't end up getting elected, but what I suspect would have happened, alongside my good friend Mike, is Trump would have made a deal with Vladimir Putin to say, you have these resources, you leave them alone, pay this up, we'll give them to you. And there would never have been a war. But of course, because we have warmongers and basically a brain-damaged president that was Joe Biden running the country, look at what the pro-globalists did. The globalists basically provoked Putin with a shadow war, inviting Ukraine into NATO. They provoked Trump into having to defend himself. They provoked him into having to take drastic action. And as I said, I suspect all of this would have been avoided if there was a deal made between Trump and Putin. As I said, that's just speculation, but it would make sense, as Trump is an entrepreneur. He has made deals before, so I think it stands to reason why he'd want to broker a deal with Russia so that they don't go and invade Ukraine and potentially have the spark to World War III. That's the way I slice it. But the mainstream media, of course, are not going to tell you this, because obviously we all know what they think of Trump with the whole orange man bad syndrome. It also turns out, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last video because I have deleted a few videos recently, but there was also that missile that was launched, accidentally or not, from Putin that ended up hitting British troops. And unfortunately, someone was killed on the back of it. And I do suspect this is going to give ammunition for Keir the traitor Starmer. But I would like to remind Keir the traitor Starmer, His duty is to the British people, not the Ukrainian people. He should not be spending any more money on foreign aid. Though devil's advocate here, he did actually make one good decision, as I said in the last video, I suspect, where he actually did cut foreign aid spending, which is something that should have been done like 20 plus years ago. And I will remind people, bear this in mind, the Allies, the globalists have all started this. They are at least partially responsible for Putin attacking Ukraine, bare minimum. Likewise for Zelensky. If a deal had been brokered, nothing would have happened. It would have been everyone lives as they normally do, and ultimately what I suspect would have also happened is Trump would have probably gotten a hold of some of that Russian gas. And I'm not talking about that time where the Russian soldiers started eating spinach. Or maybe it was a tin of baked beans, I can't remember. Anyway, the point is, this war could have been over before it even started. Oh dear. But the globalists never want war to end, as it's good money for them. They get to profit from war while men and women and children die. That is the truth behind war. And the thing is, all those soldiers that he's trying to send over to Ukraine, this Keir the traitor Starmer, is making us more vulnerable. It is making us more susceptible to attack. He is putting our national security at risk. Looks like we've got a load of people that don't look before they cross. But I guess that's the thing. I don't know, I don't get it. What's so hard? What is so hard about going and just seeing whether or not there's a car or a bus coming? I guess, to be fair, it would be a little bit hard for somebody like Joe the Demented Biden to be able to look both ways, because obviously he's getting old and senile and what have you. And to think that man actually potentially had his hand over the big red button. I don't know about you, but that's a very scary prospect for me. The way I slice this is there seems to be a running theme here with Labour Prime Ministers. Although, devil's advocate here, Rishi the Slippery Sunak could have been the one who sent the soldier that went out and got killed by that missile attack. But it seems to be a running theme, don't you think? Labour MPs, people go to war that isn't anything to do with us. Those people get killed on the back of those Prime Minister's orders. Thank you. Now here's the thing as well. A lot of us indigenous British people do not have a problem with Russians or Ukrainians. What we have a problem with is the people pulling the strings, the people in higher up positions of power, the people who basically want to screw everyone else over. Now, whether that's Ukraine, Russia, or even here in the UK is irrelevant. We hate all the people who basically want to go out of their way to cause others misery. And Keir the traitor Starmer definitely fits that category. I would think Tony the war criminal Blair also fits that category. I would think people like Rachel Reeves, or again, maybe I was right first time, people like her make others miserable. Because these people, they don't know how to do anything else. All they know how to do is be an obnoxious and insufferable bitch, quite frankly. Oh, and here's something for you. That whole minorities getting special treatment. Here's one good story. Basically, one of these Chinese nonces is going to get special treatment. Or maybe we could even see people like this mafia cop killer, Maxim Seller, basically get special treatment because they come from another country. Again, the mainstream media are not going to want to tell you the full truth on that. But the way I slice it is we have people who are going to get special treatment because they're not white. And I don't know about you, but last time I checked, isn't that discrimination against your own populace? Isn't that discrimination against white people? Isn't that racism? You know, the very things that the left-wing NPCs like to bleat on about, like dying sheep. the way I slice this, as far as that new law is concerned, or sorry, the new sentencing is concerned, is this government is basically being openly racist towards white people. If they tried this nonsense the other way round, where white people get special treatment, there would be international outrage. There would be outrage from all the mainstream shill media. There would be outrage from the Muslim community. There'd be outrage from the black community. There'd be outrage from the transgender community, just to name a few. All manners of communities would be speaking out, saying that this government would be promoting white supremacy. But obviously, because it's minorities getting special treatment, no such luck. No such luck. Blatant two-tier justice. That is what this is. That's all this promotes, and it promotes racism towards white people. And as I said, and I cannot stress enough, if this was the other way round, media would be all over this. But our government and the shill media are sending a message. It's okay to be racist against old whitey. That's why you see people who end up basically going out of their way to harass white people. Oh, here we go. Is this a copper? Might be. Nah, it doesn't look like it. Anyway, the way I slice this is I've actually had a few instances of people who are basically calling me stereotypes and racist and what have you. Little story, very brief one. So I think there was a time where I was coming back. It was, I believe, from either a job centre appointment, or it might have even been one of the protests I went to, and I was down at Castle Meadow, and all of a sudden I end up having this little black child, probably about 12, 13 years old, come up to me as I'm trying to walk to get my bus home and what have you, who ended up calling me Peter Griffin. For those that don't know, Peter Griffin is basically an embodiment of a white stereotype. Basically this, he thinks he's superior and all that shit. But I ended up getting called this by some black kid, and being that I knew what this was an attempt to provoke me, I basically looked at it, I was like, Peter Griffin. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to walk away now, because I knew full well that little twat wasn't worth my time. But sometimes I look back on that and I think, I wish I could have lectured him a bit. Sometimes I wish I could have said to that kid, is this what you want to grow up to be? A person who is racist towards white people. But then we can all say that hindsight is 20/20 vision, quite frankly. Racism is a lot more common than you think, and it's not against the minorities. So there you go, another story of why I'm not really that big a fan of children, quite frankly. Whew. But the bottom line is, as far as everything else is concerned, we are increasingly stroke number one, increasingly progressing towards a racist society. God, fucking damn it. I was so close to going without a stroke in this whole video. 28 fucking minutes! Right. I vented that out of my system. Anyway, the fact of the matter is we are heading towards a very racist society. Only it's not the white people that are guilty of that shit. Can white people do it? Oh yes, of course. No one here is going to doubt that. But here's the thing. We are heading towards a society, as I said, that our government is creating, which says it's okay to slag off old whitey. It's okay to discriminate against the white working class. In fact, anybody who is white and is not perceived to have the same views as our treacherous two-tier establishment, it's open season on whites. That's the way they look at it. And that's the way this current country is heading right now. It is heading towards that kind of society. And it sickens me. It disgusts me. Any other religion, any other race, any other sex, this would have been nipped in the bud. Just like that. Because it's ordinary white people, take your shot. This is of your creating, Keir the traitor Starmer. You're creating this. Your blatant racism towards anybody who isn't a minority. Your discrimination against ordinary people is not going unnoticed. As I've said, you will be the most hated and the worst Prime Minister we have ever had in our entire history and for at least the next 1,000 years. There is no way anybody is going to top all the shit you've done, Keir the traitor Starmer. And you're one of the people who's trying to see it over in the Ukraine and Russia. You're trying to see this war go on. You sit there and grandstand and say, we've made a big leap for peace and all that shit. No, you haven't made a big leap for peace. You've leaped about as far towards peace as I have to the moon. You have not leaped any fucking where. Only thing you've been doing is going backwards in a big way. Like, if we were measured based off of the advancements we'd made, we'd probably be back in like the 15th century. Hell, if we keep going down this path and Islam takes over, we're going back to the fucking 5th century. Because of you, Keir the traitor Starmer. You are responsible for this. You are responsible, alongside NATO and the EU and all the other globalist shills, for starting the Russian invasion into Ukraine in the first place. Sure, Putin shouldn't have invaded. He should have been the better man. But what do you expect a guy to do when his back's up against the wall and they've got weapons aimed at the front door? I know what I'd do if my fucking castle was threatened. I'm going to get something and I'm going to defend my damn home, quite frankly. And speaking of defending my home, nothing's going to defend this home from me as I go and raid the fridge for one of the meals I'm going to be cooking. The super quick 5-spice chicken noodles. Because it only takes 15 minutes to do. A bit closer maybe. Yeah, 15 minutes. Only 4 steps to it as well. 4 steps until I get out the kitchen. Anyway, the point is, Keir the traitor Starmer is directly responsible for putting down the foundations of a racist society. It's ironic how, who are the first ones to cry racism? Or more appropriately, Islamophobia? Well, I've just answered that question for you. Keir the traitor Starmer is on the side of Islam, not the side of Britain. He is on the side of globalism, not nationalism or patriotism. He does not see that he is lighting the fuse to his own demise. And when that powder keg blows, it will all blow up in his face. But I think Keir the traitor Starmer is going to be unique in history, quite frankly. He is going to be unique. And it's a rather fitting way to end the video, to be honest. What do you constantly hear people call us? The so-called far right. Fascists? Xenophobes? Racists? Fascists. Yeah, what is our political establishment? A fascistic dictatorship working with Islam and building a racist society. And that is what Keir the traitor Starmer is going to be renowned for. The only Prime Minister to actually start building a truly racist society.